great to have everyone here. My name is Kiana Louis-Charles. I'm the volunteer manager at Ottawa Bluesfest. Joining me today is Jameen Eckhart and Hannah Steeds, also from Volunteer Services. And also in the room, we have some Bluesfest volunteer leaders, we have some staff, and we also have some training support today. So to welcome everyone, I'd first like to introduce our Executive Director, Mark Monahan.
Thanks, Kiana, and thanks for the intro. And also just a great thank you to all the volunteer team that's on tonight. It's amazing how many are actually on this Zoom call. I just want to say a few brief words. I think the big thing is this is the 30th year, and it's a huge achievement. When we started the festival 30 years ago, I think we always planned to survive one more year, and we've done that now for 30 years. So it's an amazing achievement, but it's really happened with the help of all of you, all the volunteers. And I just want to leave you and let you continue with the meeting, but say that, I about 10 years ago, I happened to host one of our corporate sponsors, and the CEO actually happened to come to the festival. We sat down. He was saying, well, how many staff do you have? Who runs the festival? And I said, well, we have also close to 3,000 volunteers. And he really was stunned by that. And he said, that is phenomenal. He goes, I've walked around the site, and I've been greeted by many of these people. And honestly, you are blessed with the opportunity to have so many dedicated volunteers. And I think this year we're going to recognize the first 30-year volunteer, which is unbelievable, really, when you think about it. So I think what I just want to leave you with is that you are all the lifeblood of the festival. We've achieved so much together. I want all of us to be proud of the fact that we've made it to 30 years, and hopefully many more to come. But I just want to say, enjoy the fruits of your labor, but also your contribution is immeasurable, and I hope to see many of you on site. And if you do, please say hi, and love to give you a high five. So continue with the meeting. Thanks, Kiana, and we'll see you at the festival.
Thank you very much, Mark. Echoing all of those messages, definitely a very special year. So we're very excited here. All right, so I'm going to get into a presentation, and I'm going to start with sharing my screen. So let's get there first. Perfect. And I hope everyone can see this. You should all be able to see here. And we'll get started. So welcome to our volunteer orientation for this year. So the agenda for tonight, I'll go through it so we're all aware of where we are and what's to come. So orientation etiquette. So our orientation is tonight. So we'll go through some etiquette for all of you. Our festival mission, we will go through our code of conduct and harassment policy. We'll do perks of being an Ottawa Bluesfest volunteer, our volunteer top 10, hours of operation, the site map, go through our EPP, which is our emergency preparedness plan, volunteer check-in reminders, getting ready for your first shift, on-site training reminders, and then after this presentation, so once we've gone through all of those topics, we'll do a bystander awareness training, and then we'll break out into breakout rooms with your individual teams, okay? And we'll guide you through it, so you'll kind of know what's happening when, so there should be no surprises for all of you. So some orientation etiquette. So again, the orientation is happening right now, so the call we're in. So some etiquette for tonight, keep your microphone muted for the duration of the presentation. So this presentation here, though, hold your questions until the breakout rooms, because you'll be with your area leaders. So you will have the opportunity there to ask your questions about anything we spoke about tonight, or about any questions you have about being a volunteer, what is expected of you, and all of that stuff. Jameen, if you could take care of the thank you. Okay, we'll continue on. So our festival mission. So Ottawa Bluesfest is a nonprofit charitable organization. Our mission is to present a world-class music festival featuring international, Canadian, and local artists in downtown Ottawa each July. We are youth-friendly, community and visitor-focused, culturally diverse, and committed to sustainability and eco-friendly initiatives. Okay, so we'll go through our code of conduct and harassment policy first. These are some highlights. At the end, I will show you the direct link to where you'll find it. But again, I'd like to do some nuggets of the code of conduct and harassment policy for all of you. So a very important kind of rule we have here, attending all of your scheduled shifts. So it's very important to attend all of your scheduled shifts. We ask of you to be a reliable volunteer. So your leaders like when you're reliable and showing up when you've been signed up to show up. So that's kind of your word. We try to hold each other to our words. So signing up, it means you will attend your shifts. So for example, each team has a minimum of shifts that you're required to do. That could be 4, that could be 5, some are 20 hours. They're all about the same, but each team has one on your front page of Bloomerang, your opportunity page. So there's a minimum shifts. Generally, there is no maximum. Sometimes there is. But if you sign up for 10 shifts and you think, oh, the minimum is 4, so I'll only attend 4 out of the 10, we would consider that an unreliable volunteer because they are showing up when they want and the leader kind of has expectations of what their shifts look like. So what that means is that if you sign up for shifts and you have 10, but you only plan to attend 4, remove the shifts from your schedule that you don't plan on attending. So your leader knows that, oh, you're reliable because you're showing up to the ones you say you will, and you're removing the ones you can't attend. Tonight is the last night where you can remove your shifts. So by the end of today, you will no longer be able to remove your shifts. So I definitely suggest taking a look at your schedule at the end of this call. Once we've concluded for tonight, take a look at your schedule and ensure all of your shifts on your schedule are the ones you will attend. And after tonight, if something comes up and you can't attend one of those shifts, we ask you to get in touch with your area leader. So again, that reliability, knowing when you'll be there and getting in touch when you realize maybe you won't be able to. So attending all of your scheduled shifts, and then being kind and respectful to all people on site, patrons, staff, and volunteers included. You will meet a lot of people on site. It's a great opportunity to meet new faces, and you might not know if they're a patron or a staff or a volunteer. So we ask you to be kind to whoever you may encounter on site. So no drinking / using cannabis or other intoxicants at any point before or during your volunteer shift. And as well as reading and following all of our policies, including the code of conduct, harassment policy at all times while on site. So these can be found on our volunteer website on the training page. So I'll take you there now. So you should be able to see my screen on the training page, and I'll quickly show you how I got here. So on our volunteer website, if you see volunteers.ottawabluesfest.ca, once you go to the Bluesfest tab, you'll see training, you'll click it here, and you'll be shown our code of conduct, which has our harassment policy within it. So you can click that and you can go through it. We ask that you do before your first shift so that you're aware of what we expect of you. And I also just wanted to highlight some other important links on this training page because we put all of our important documents here. So I'll go through some of them here. So our volunteer handbook, our parental permission form, which we will get into a little later, but if you're a youth, this is for you. Our Smart Serve training. So for those who are serving alcoholic beverages on site, by law, we are required to ask you to do a Smart Serve training. So we do have a reimbursement process for that. So if you are in an area that serves alcoholic beverages, then there is a process and a form we ask you to fill out and an approval we will give to you before getting that training. So we have emailed you that form. If you haven't received it, check back in your email to see if it's there. If not, send us an email and we'll share with you that process again of what reimbursement looks like. And you can email us at volunteers@ottawabluesfest.ca. Some other documents here, accessibility training, which we ask you to do, reporting procedures for volunteers, what to do in certain situations, and our emergency preparedness plan, which we will also look at today. Okay, let's continue on. All right, so some perks of being an Ottawa Bluesfest volunteer. So you'll receive a free RFID wristband for the festival and a volunteer t-shirt. You'll receive this when you sign into your first shift at volunteer check-in. For your wristband, this gets you entry into the festival. We ask that you do not share your wristband with anybody else. It's yours and yours only, and they're quite difficult to replace, so we try not to. And as well as, again, keeping it to yourself and bringing it to every shift. And as well as your volunteer t-shirt as well, which you receive at the first shift once you come to volunteer check-in. Volunteer Village, so and an exclusive place for all of our volunteers. So Volunteer Village homes our welcome center, which has snacks, special 2024 theme for our 30-year anniversary. And it includes lots of fun things like games, new this year is a food truck, which I'll talk a little bit about later, and some really fun things, including where you'll check in. So it's in a very important location for all of you. And we'll go through a site map as well, so you'll be able to see some important places for volunteers. Volunteer bag check, so checking in your bag when you're on site. We have that located at the Welcome Center. A meal token for a free vendor meal or sandwich from the Welcome Center for each shift. So every time you sign in for a shift at volunteer check-in, once they've signed you in, they will hand you back a meal voucher. And that meal voucher is only good for that day. And as well as you'll get one for each shift that day. And we also have a bike park and free OC Transpo access. So bike park, if you're biking to site, it's a bike valet, and free OC Transpo when you're coming to site as well. I also wanted to mention, we'll go to the next slide for it though. So Ottawa Bluesfest top 10. So know what you signed up for. So I wanted to mention a few things here. So knowing what you signed up for, what does that mean? So each of you are in different areas. Not every volunteer signed up to do the same role. So knowing what that role means to you, what you'll be doing on site is important. We put that on our website. So it's on our opportunities page. There is a job description and accessibility information for all of your areas. If you would like to see it or it's been taken down, it's usually on your Bloomerang page where you pick up and drop your shifts. If not, we're free to share it with you as well so that you're aware, again, what you've signed up for. An important point I wanted to note regarding shifts is knowing what you signed up for. Volunteers, we ask that they only sign up for one area. So we do our best to check volunteer schedules, but we ask that when you're registering, all of the shifts on your schedule are only for one team. That's very important. So if you look at your schedule tonight after this call, as we mentioned, and once you're doing your check and you see that there's green team and IT and VIP all on your schedule, then you need to remove the other areas and have just one team on your schedule. Tip number 2, adhering to policies about drugs and alcohol. Number 3, respect patrons, artists, fellow volunteers, and anyone else that you may encounter on site. Number 4, notify your area leader as soon as possible if you cannot attend a shift. Again, going into number 5, being reliable. So leaders will expect you to attend the shifts on the day you're scheduled. But again, if you realize that you won't be there, you should notify them immediately, as leaders may ask an unreliable volunteer not to return in a future year, and we want you to return every single year that you want to. So please continue to be reliable and in touch with your leaders. Using technology appropriately. So while you're on shift, we ask that you are working your duties that your leader or supervisor has asked you to do. In the case of an emergency, there may be an instance where you need to pull out a cell phone to contact somebody or something like that. But again, using technology where it's appropriate and when it's appropriate. And that includes pictures, a cell phone, or any other technological devices that you may have or bring to site. Being present, so that's a huge one. It's going to be a very immersive experience for a lot of us, and we're all very in it. So being present with us and assisting and being a great volunteer is being present. Respect the privacy of others and the confidentiality of the festival information. So we may share things with you. So respecting the information you may encounter on site, especially depending on the role you're working, you may be privy to some information that other volunteers aren't. And number 10, our biggest one, have fun. So again, it's going to be a great 10 days, lots of music, lots of things to discover and people to meet. So have fun, be present, enjoy the moment. Okay, so our volunteer hours of operation. So some key hours for you to know. So our volunteer check-in, this is when you are checking in for your shift, picking up your t-shirt, getting your meal voucher. So that opens on Volunteer Island from 2 to 9:30 each day, 2 p.m., 9:30 p.m. Bag check, which is located at our welcome center. So from 2 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Free show check-in, which I will show you on the map, a little different from volunteer check-in, is open from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Vendors, so where you can use your meal ticket, your meal voucher, they're open from 4 to 10:30 p.m. Gates open each day at 5 o'clock. The bike park, if you're bringing your bike, opens from 3:30 to 11:30. The Welcome Center, which again has bag checks, some snacks, and also some new fun things that they'll be hosting this time around. They open from 2 to 11:30. And then our volunteer admin office, which is located in the War Museum, is open from noon to 11:30 p.m. Okay, our site map. So lots of key areas for volunteers. We've highlighted the ones you should definitely know, but I'll talk about some other ones. So Volunteer Island is the first one. So again, it's an exclusive area for volunteers. So you'll be able to meet a lot of other leaders and volunteers in that space, which is great because they may be working in different areas, but it's a centralized place that we can all gather and see each other and eat meals if we'd like to at that time. So it's located almost, I'll say, kind of maybe at the back of site. Typically volunteers come from OC Transpo if you're busing or if you're taking one of these streets here that kind of cut off into the screen. So if you're regularly taking the OC Transpo, we put it on the map here for you. So you'd come down Booth Street and then there's an entrance onto the Volunteer Island there. And again, our Volunteer Island has volunteer check-in. So when you're checking in for your shift, and it has our welcome center. So your bag check and other fun snacks and things from them. I will mention that on the island this year, we're doing some new fun things for our 30th anniversary. So we have special things like carnival games. We're going to be doing a food truck. We'll also have some themed snacks and some live music. So feel free to head over there before or after your shift, or if you have time during your break, there's going to be a lot of fun things going on in that space. So it's definitely a good place to repose and to hang out if you're looking for one. Some other landmarks on here for volunteers. Bike park, again, I mentioned if you're bringing a bike, if you're biking here, there's biking valet. And then I will also mention the volunteer gates. So say you're coming down from OC Transpo, let's walk it together. You come down Booth Street, you walk into volunteer check-in, gather your shirt, your meal voucher, you have your wristband, and then you're looking for an access to site. So if you go to the other end of the volunteer island, there's this bridge here, and this bridge here leads to a volunteer gate. So it says on our map here, volunteers only. So that is a gate for volunteers to enter. So taking that bridge off of Volunteer Island will get you there. So that's one important spot. I'll also mention the Canadian War Museum. So that is probably the biggest infrastructure we have on site. It's a key place to note because that is our evacuation site. So we will get into our emergency preparedness plan a little later, and I can come back to this to again show it to you. But in the case of an evacuation and you're on site, you would be directed to the Canadian War Museum. If you're on the Volunteer Island and there is an evacuation, the big building where Volunteer Check-in and Welcome Center is housed is also an option to evacuate to, because it is, again, an infrastructure on site that we are allowed to use that has a strong foundation. So again, these two big points of the Volunteer Building and the Canadian War Museum. Some other things to note. So OC Transpo is offering free rides for Ottawa Bluesfest volunteers and patrons between 2 p.m. and 1:30 daily. So if you're taking the bus to site and you show the bus driver your wristband, you can take OC Transpo for free. And the same with Paratranspo. And then also to note, very important, that there is no parking on site for volunteers. So we encourage you to walk or please bike or take public transportation where possible.
Dana, can I just mention something? Because if you're taking OC Transpo for free, if you don't get on a bus and there isn't somebody to talk to, what you need to do is go in the station, like if you're at LRT, and push the button to talk to somebody, and then they will see you. You tell them you're a volunteer, and then they'll spit out a ticket for you. So it's just a little bit different, and a lot of the LRT stations don't have anybody working in them. So if you're wondering how you would do that, that's how you do it.
That's great. Thank you, Jermaine. Okay, so our 2024 emergency preparedness plan. So again, I mentioned where it was on the website, but I want to go through it with everyone here. So you should be able to still see my screen. Okay, so we'll go through it at a high level, but again, I ask that once the call is done, that you go through and read it in depth so that you're aware of our policies. But to start, Central Command is a central location where they man our emergency lines. So on site, they are the ones in direct contact with our first aid, our police services, and our security. So say you happen to find yourself in an emergency situation and you look around site, you can't see a direct security guard that is in front of you, or you're looking around and you don't see an area leader or a supervisor, because those can be a first option for you. If you find yourself without those options, then we have a phone number. So I suggest you put this phone number in your cell phone as a contact. So just in case you're ever looking for it, that you can pull up the Central Command contact that you will have stored on your phone. So that's their number there. We won't go through the colors. These are mostly geared towards volunteers with a walkie-talkie, and those are supervisors and leaders. So you may not hear colors, but if you do and you want to know what that means, you'll have access to this plan here. Missing child or a lost person or a found child. So I want to go through that protocol with everyone, just because you may, again, find yourself in a situation where you notice that, oh, this child is clearly lost. So I want to go through what that looks like for you. So if you find yourself in that situation, the first thing you should do is confirm that that person or child is lost. So either having a conversation with them, or maybe the child is crying and no one is rushing to come and pick up that child. That is where you make your first inquiry. Oh, this person could be lost. And this could be someone who's elderly. This could be a child. This could be anybody. Anybody could be missing from who they want to be. So confirming they're lost. So having that conversation with them. And then we ask that you wait 5 to 10 minutes after you find that child, because a parent could come back. We don't want you taking children from site if they're not meant to be lost, if they're meant to be there. So please wait to see if someone does come back, and give them that time to come back to that spot where they may have said was a meeting point between those two patrons. So wait first. And then once those 10 minutes have gone by, we ask that the lost person is escorted to the info booth. So the info booth is a key spot on site. And looking at our map now, so the info booth, you'll see under a legend, info ? So our info booth is on Vimy. So in between the Canadian War Museum and the road there, you'll see the ? right before you get to the bowl, and you'll see the information tent, and they'll have a big sign so that you know they're the information tent. Oops, sorry, I've got to get back into this. Great. Okay, so bringing the lost person or child to the information tent, and then we'll ask you to record any details of the encounter that you just had. So where you found the child, the conversation you may have had, what they were wearing, any details that you just experienced should go on a sheet of paper. And then the info booth tent or supervisor or leader that has a radio should radio Central Command, and that process will continue in their hands with your details. So it's very important to know this, because you may find yourself in this situation. So I want to go through that with you of what your duty and what your role would be. And it would be, again, those kind of steps of waiting, escorting, collecting your details, passing it on to someone with a radio to contact those necessary support people. full evacuation. So again, I mentioned our evacuation points are the War Museum and the Volunteer Building. In the case of site not being open, we don't open the doors, so we keep the gates closed. And if you find yourself on site during, if the site has just closed and we're going into evacuation, you'll hear messaging of moving into the War Museum where possible. So look to your area leader, look to your supervisor of any messaging of where to go next. In the case of not having that, if maybe you're walking in, you have the, again, email communication and the central command phone number at your disposal. And then lastly, persons with disabilities. So again, if we're in that evacuation process and we're all escorting each other to the War Museum and you see someone, maybe a youth volunteer or a person with disability that isn't aware of the plan or is looking for that help, do your best to help them and escort them with you. If you are already on your way and you see someone coming down that path, just to make sure that we're all kind of supporting each other in those situations. Okay, so again, I encourage you to go through the emergency preparedness plan. It's on the website and those numbers can be saved in your phone. Take a screenshot before you come to site to have that in your back pocket. It's a great resource.
Kiana, before we move on from the map, could we just point out the volunteer free show check-in just
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, great point. Okay, so free show check-in. I mentioned before that it's a little different from going all the way to the island. So when you're coming in for a free show, so either your shift is done or hasn't started and you have that time, or it's your off day, when you're coming in to check in for that free show, this is where the tent is located. So you wouldn't go all the way down to the island and it would be past the main gate here. So you'd go past that main gate and you'll see a side street. Once you go down that side street right in front of the museum, you'll see that volunteer free show check-in tent.
There's also a free show check-in person at the volunteer gate. So if you do make it all the way to the volunteer gate, you can check in there as well.
Yes, we do ask you to go to volunteer check-in, one of these ones first before going to the gate, because they're meant to just check. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, some volunteer check-in reminders. So again, we're talking about when you check in as a volunteer, when you're coming for your shift. So here are some reminders for you for when you're coming to your shift. So you must bring your photo ID. So government issued ID that you have with you to your shift before each and every shift. And one thing I'll mention is that we also ask that you bring your photo ID with you when you're signing in for a free show. So at the free show check-in tent. So what that would mean for a volunteer would mean anytime you're coming to site to have your ID on you, because you'll either be checking in at the island with volunteer check-in, or you'll be checking in at the free show check-in tent. So either way, you'll need your ID. So anytime you're coming to site, it's always best to check that you have your ID on you before you leave the place that you're leaving. So always bring your ID with you. Volunteers who are aged 15 to 17. So if you are a youth volunteer between the ages of 15 and 17, then you must bring a signed parental permission form. And you must bring this before your first shift. So when you're coming in for your first shift, that's what you should have with you. So when you're about to get your first shirt and your first wristband, you will hand back your youth permission form. And this is required. So you will not be able to volunteer. So you won't be able to get your shirt and wristband unless you present them with this youth permission form. And as I mentioned, it is on that training page. So with the volunteer handbook, the code of conduct, the Smart Serve laws, all of that also is the parental permission form for you to print and sign with your parents. So your parents should be filling that out for you. Another reminder is volunteer check-in will open first on July 4th at 2 p.m. So that means you will not be able to collect your t-shirt or your wristband before that day. So that will be the first opportunity they're open and the first chance you'll get to be able to get a wristband and a shirt. So that is the first day of the festival at 2 p.m. Reminders, perfect. Okay, so some tips and tricks of getting ready for your first shift. So always check the weather and come prepared. We do continue shows and operations during rain. So if you notice it's a little cloudy that day and you're coming to see a free show or volunteering, that you come prepared with what you may need. And also if it's really hot, bringing a water bottle, bringing a cap, ensuring that you have everything you need with you for that day. Always wear your volunteer t-shirt while you're working and change into something else while you're not. So this is very important. So when you're working your shift, we ask that every time you have your volunteer shirt, and if you're not working, we ask you to every time change out of that. So if you are expecting to come for a free show or stay after or before your shift, please bring a change of top because you just have your volunteer shirt. We say this because we have a very strict rule about volunteers not be able to consume alcoholic beverages while they're working. And so if they're a patron, they may. So if you're coming in for a free show, you can. But if we see a volunteer in a volunteer shirt drinking an alcoholic beverage, that's when we have to have a conversation with you. So that we ask you to separate that by wearing your regular clothes if you're coming in for a free show and being a patron, and wearing a volunteer shirt when you're working at all times, even if you're not consuming alcoholic beverages. If you're a patron, wear your regular clothes. Okay, so, and then we'll move on to having your photo ID and your parental permission form. So again, every time you're on site, having that ID with you. And if you're a youth volunteer, bringing that form before you come in for your first shift. Checking in for your shift at Volunteer Check-in, located on the Volunteer Island. So going there first, remember that should be a first point of contact, unless you're signing in for a free show, then you can go to the free show tent. So one of those two check-in points should be your first step before walking onto site. And then once, if you're working, so you should go to Volunteer Check-in. And then once you've checked in with Volunteer Check-in, you'll go on to working your shift. And before you start working, check in with your area leader or supervisor at the beginning of your shift so that they know you arrived from Volunteer Check-in. It's a little bit of a walk depending on where you're working from Volunteer Check-in. So they want to make sure you made it there. So again, if you're volunteering, you have your ID, you come to Volunteer Check-in, you check in with Volunteer Check-in, and then you go to your working spot and speak to your area leader or supervisor so that they know you have arrived. A note I wanted to put getting ready for your shift is to come early. Definitely come early. I would avoid trying to make it to site at the time your shift starts. You can anticipate walking down Booth Street to Volunteer Check-in. So that is a little bit of time. And then once you get to Volunteer Check-in, there may be some lines, especially on those first few days when volunteers are wanting to pick up their shirts and their wristbands. So anticipate lots of time before your shift to check in and to walk the site and to make it to where you need to go and all of that stuff. On-site training. So our next meeting with everybody will be on site, which is so exciting to finally be going into July. So our on-site training will be an opportunity for you to see the site, meet your area leaders, and get some important training directly within your area, which is great. So this will take place next week on Wednesday. It will be July 3rd at 6 p.m. And we're going to be meeting on site. We'll meet at the Sirius XM stage. And I'll show everyone where that is. So again, on our map, the Sirius XM stage is in this corner here. So you could maybe come from Wellington, either way, come down here from OC Transpo, but we will be meeting in this tent here. And again, if you can come a tad early, not too early, to make sure you know where you're going, but we will have support on site. We will have volunteers scattered around site to try to point you in the right direction. But please, once you get there, please go directly to the Sirius XM stage because we will still have some construction around site as we continue to build it. So we ask that once you're on site that you go to that one central location because we will all be meeting there. So we'll see you on July 3rd. I also wanted to remind everyone that if you come to that training, it isn't mandatory, but we highly suggest you come, especially if you haven't been there, if you haven't been a volunteer with us before, or if you're returning because things change. The site changes sometimes too. So we could walk you to a new area once we split up that day to where you'll be working. So we highly encourage you to come to that training. If you are a first-year volunteer and you attend that training, we take attendance and that attendance will trigger your free show check-in. So if you attend and you're a first-time volunteer and you haven't done a shift yet, attending this training will allow you to see a free show before your first shift. So that's a great opportunity. And if you're an early bird or returning volunteer, you can already see free shows. You're good. So, but either way, we would like to see everyone on that July 3rd meeting at the SiriusXM stage. Okay, so now we are going to go into our bystander awareness training. So I want to introduce Julie to everyone. She comes from Stand Up Canada, and she will begin her training.
So happy to be here. I run the Stand Up project for Canada. I've worked with an organization called Right to Be for a number of years now. I'm actually based in Ottawa. I'm a longtime Bluesfest attendee. So really excited to give folks some tangible things that you can do if you are witnessing any kind of hate harassment, in particular sexual harassment that happens, unfortunately, all over the city, but we know in the city of Ottawa, especially around mass gatherings, but also, you know, if you're taking OC Transpo to get there, if you're walking from downtown, like if you're seeing stuff, what you can do in order to be an effective bystander that puts an end to the behavior instead of escalating it, which is a lot of people's fear is like, I'm seeing this, it looks sketchy, but how do I help without making it worse? So I'm wondering, first of all, if folks want to chime in and tell me, what percentage of people do you think say it improved the situation when someone intervened to stop the harassment? So I'm being harassed, you come and help me. What percentage of the time does that actually help the situation versus making it worse? Do you think it's 15, 79, 45, or 62% of the time? So if you want to ponder, what do you think? Sometimes folks think it's quite low, have very little faith in other people. But the good news is it is 79. So even without training, the vast majority of the time when you intervene, it makes a positive difference for the person being targeted. The problem is people are only intervening 25% of the time. So that is what our campaign has been striving to change, is to really give people the tools to be able to intervene. So as I said, I work to end gender-based violence, and I work with an organization called Right to Be, and in partnership with L'Oréal Paris, we've created this campaign. Right to Be used to be called Hollaback, so some of you might be familiar with Hollaback Ottawa. We fought to get the "Are you feeling unsafe? Are you being harassed?" posters that you saw in OC Transpo. We also created the anonymous reporting mechanism. So since the very beginning of our inception, we've been about giving people the opportunity to share their experiences of harassment, but also equipping people to intervene when they witness it. So just to say, if you have an experience of harassment or something happens to you, you can always submit your story to us on the Right to Be site, where you can get that affirmation from other folks. But you can also learn the tangible skills that you are going to be learning here today, thanks to Bluesfest inviting us to come on board. So the goal is to really create a world where we can all be who we are, wherever we are. Everybody pays to go to Bluesfest, or they volunteer their time to be there. Everybody has the right to be safe when they're enjoying the shows, when they're volunteering, when they're working there. And it's up to all of us to keep our eyes open if we see stuff and know how to react. So unfortunately, what this stuff looks like is a wide variety of things, but we're focusing specifically on sexual violence, which, as I've already mentioned, is unfortunately an issue that we see in the city all of the time, but especially, like I said, if you're taking transit to get there, you're commuting in some way, shape, or form, chances are you might be seeing something. So street harassment is also known as sexual harassment in public spaces. We know that the folks that are the most targeted are women, young people, people of color, and LGBTQ+ individuals. The harassment that they experience happens more often, tends to be more severe, and if someone doesn't intervene, is more likely to escalate. So I'm going to show you a little video now that's going to give you some examples of harassment to give you a better understanding if it's not something you've experienced, but also kind of show you some ways in which people respond as witnesses, people who are observing it. So it's not particularly explicit, but do take care of yourself the best way you know how.
We see it happen everywhere, at any time.
78% of women have experienced sexual harassment in public spaces.
Like a suggestive comment,
A sexually explicit touch,
an inappropriate gesture,
or being followed. And it threatens our self-worth.
it takes over who we are.
We see it happen, but stay cautiously silent and uncomfortably look away.
maybe because we don't know what to do.
How to help.
Or how to combat the situation.
I said I'm fine, so don't bother me.
The time has come to keep our heads up and to stand up for each other against street harassment.
And everyone can be part of the solution.
Sorry, I'm gonna pay for it.
Excuse me. Is this yours?
Can you help me, please? I'm looking for this direction.
L'Oreal Paris and the nonprofit organization Holla Back have joined forces to teach men and women how to combat sexual harassment in public spaces with simple but impactful actions. Take a stand and learn how to combat street harassment at standup.l'orealparis.com, because we are all worth it.
So what you saw there were unfortunately examples of folks being harassed, but also ways in which people can intervene. And these are not just, things that we should settle for. These are actually proven to be the most effective ways to de-escalate a situation and to diffuse any kind of hate and harassment that you witness. So we've created a methodology called the 5 Ds, which are 5 really practical ways in which folks can intervene if they witness any kind of hate or harassment. So the examples we're focusing on today are about sexual violence, but if you're witnessing racism, Islamophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, like anything nasty is going on, the same principles of how to intervene apply. So let's go through our 5 Ds, and let's start with an example of how we can distract. So distract is the first tool in our toolbox. So as you saw here, this woman accidentally, oopsie daisy, tripped on the bus, dropped her notebook, and in doing so, broke the contact between the harasser and the person being targeted. And that split second would have allowed her to get off the bus if she wanted to, but also just to be like, oh my goodness, focus on you. And now I'm focusing on you and I get to ignore the person harassing me. She also kind of upped the ante a little bit and physically used her body to create a block between the two people, which is another really effective way that you can act like, I'm just a person who's just waiting for the bus, waiting for this, just kind of casually standing around, but I'm actually intervening. Additionally, you can be chatty. So if you can't create a distraction through being clumsy or anything like that, you can go up to the person being targeted and say, hey, how do you like the show? Or, oh my God, my favorite band's coming up next. I'm so stoked. Or like, oh, how are you handling this heat? Like, just find an excuse to chat with the person who's being targeted to give them an opportunity to focus on you and then use that as an exit if they need to. Because the whole point of being an effective bystander is to basically create exit opportunities for the people who are being harmed. So creating a distraction, pretending to know them, asking them their name, asking them, if they're doing all right, like anything you can do to engage them in a conversation allows them to get away safely. So if any of you have ever, especially women, have pretended to know a woman at a bar that you've never met in your life before, but acted like you were her BFF to just get her away from someone being creepy, this is actually an effective form of intervention called distract. Now let's look at how we can delegate.
There's a man touching a woman at the back of the bus, and I don't know what to do. Can you help?
So this one, you're going to use your judgment depending on the context. If you're on the bus, you can go up to the driver. If you're at a coffee shop, you can go up to the barista. But if you're at the festival, either as a patron or a volunteer, this is when you can delegate to security. That is their job, and they can't be everywhere all of the time, right? So flagging someone down and saying, hey, this looks really awful. This person looks uncomfortable. I'm concerned about this person's behavior. Delegating to someone else is a really great way in which you don't have to take charge if you don't know what to do or you're too scared to get involved directly because it maybe is too real for you in some way, shape, or form. Then you can delegate to someone else. Also delegating to another bystander, delegating to another person who's volunteering to say, hey, does that look off to you? I feel like there's something going on here. Should we check in? People are more likely to answer your call for help if you are specific in saying, hey, I'm planning on doing something. Would you do it with me? People are absolutely likely to answer that call for help, even if it's just another person on the 95 with you, for example. Okay, now let's look at how we can document. So So what you see here is that she's taken out her phone and started recording. What you can't see is that she's also asked someone else to go and tell the driver. So ideally, you're not just going to document, you're going to do it in tandem with something else. Also, you're going to remember what your job is here. It is not to start streaming live. It is not to capture footage that you're then going to post online later. The goal here is to create any kind of documentation that you can put in her hands for her to decide how she wants to proceed. If she wants to report it, if she wants to, tell her story on a platform, she can do so, right? So the goal here is really photo, video, license plate number, a description, right? If something's happened really quickly and you weren't able to pull out your phone, you can write down, okay, what did this person look like? What were their, what shirt were they wearing? Anything like that, to then approach the person who's been harmed to say, hey, I saw that. Are you okay? How can I help you? Here's what I have. Do we want to go and talk to someone? If you're on OC Transpo, right, same thing. Do you want to go and tell the driver, I captured this footage? But really just sort of using any form of documentation that you can to put it in their hands to help them make a case if they want to tell their story. Okay, just 2 more tools left. Now we're going to look at how we can delay.
Are you okay? Want me to hang around for a bit so he doesn't come back?
So delay might seem to a lot of people like, well, what are you doing? You're not actually solving the problem, right? Oftentimes people are like, but you're not. But what's so important to understand about delay is that we actually partnered with Cornell University in the States to research the impact of just checking in on someone after a really scary incident. And it literally reduces the level of trauma associated with the incident. That is how powerful it is when we see something happen and we connect with the person to be like, oh my God, are you okay? I saw what happened. How can I help? So delay is really helpful, I find, in 2 circumstances. One, when it happened super quickly. So something really shady went down and everyone's sort of like, and then the person who was involved kind of walked away, got off the bus, got lost in the crowd, and you're like, okay, well, what can I do? I can turn to the person who's been harmed and say, oh my goodness, are you okay? Do you want to sit with me? Do you want to borrow my phone? Do you want to walk with me somewhere? Like, how can I be of assistance? But it's also helpful in those moments where, frankly, it feels too intense for us to get involved directly, maybe because it's racism and you're a person of color, and so you feel like this is way too scary for me to get involved. Or it's an experience that you've had personally, and so you're sort of in that freeze response, and then the moment passes and you're like, oh, shoot. Absolutely hang back, watch what happens, and then check in on the person or people being harmed. It makes a huge, huge difference. And lastly, we're going to look at our final tool, which is when you want to get involved in the moment. You're seeing it happen, you want to step in. How can you do that without escalating? I'm going to play the video for you, and then I'm going to pause it, and we're going to talk about how it's a 2-step process.
Hey, I like your jacket. Where'd you get it?
Could you leave me alone? You're being totally inappropriated right now.
All right, so step 1, you see something, you feel like you can say something, you feel confident to do it, you're confronting a stranger, right? So make sure that you feel safe, and then you're going to get them to stop and set a boundary with them. You're not peppering them with 1,000 questions, you're not using sarcasm, you're not trying to be sassy, you're just being like, said no, enough. And then you want to turn towards the person or people being harmed to help them get away from the situation. The reason why people think bystander intervention leads to escalation is because they think, I have to stand here for as long as it takes to educate this person that what they're doing is not okay. That's not effective, especially when you're talking about strangers. If there's alcohol involved, if people are getting aggressive, it just makes things worse. But shutting it down and then quickly focusing on the person who's been harmed to help them get away is the best thing to do. And if it happens on festival grounds, you can, call security and say, hey, this person is a problem. I've taken care of the poor person who was being harmed by them, but we need to eject this person from the space, right? But the number one priority always when someone's being harmed is stop the harm and focus on the person who's being harmed. If you're not sure, you go up to them and say, hey, is everything all right here? Do you know this person? Are they bothering you? Having a good time tonight? Everything okay? Any kind of a check-in question. Again, ignoring the person committing the violence and focusing on the person who you think is being targeted to ask them how they're doing means you're more likely to help them get away without cranking up the volume and making it more intense. So whether you're on festival grounds, whether you're out on, after partying, whether you're on the 95, at a coffee shop, doesn't matter. If we see stuff, we do have capacity to do something about it. And again, there are 5 proven ways that folks can intervene, and only one of them involves even having to speak to the person who is committing the harm. The other 4 are equally as effective. All the research shows that, but you don't even have to talk to the person who's committing harm. You can just focus on the folks who are being harmed. So I want to encourage folks to keep their eyes open wherever they happen to be, to have a great festival experience, and to really think about what small little thing can I do to de-escalate the situation and make sure that everybody has a good time. So thanks again to the Bluesfest folks for inviting us. If folks want more information, we have a full hour-long free training that we do that folks can take if they want to find out more information. But fundamentally, the 5 Ds will help you have a safer festival experience. So thanks for giving us the floor to talk about it.
Thank you very much, Julie. That's great to finally have some training back in place for our volunteers so that they may know what to do in some of those situations and to be able to help out others. So that's great. Thanks so much.